Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I love tequila, but if you're a startup, tequila distributor or not, where do you go when there's an interruption in time or continuity, a pause or break, especially a period when something such as a pandemic has interrupted your normal commerce? Kris Desoto is the founder and CEO of Hiatus Tequila. And on this episode, we'll discuss how tequila is made, where to go as a startup during a pandemic, and thinking about how you communicate with and reach your customers. Blue Weber agave, memories of Mexico, shots, Clorox wipes for a liquor bottle, Dan and Shay, helicopters, hand sanitizers, and one of my favorite diving spots for great big sharks in Baja, a free off-run shipping, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a tequila CEO with a shark who truly enjoys tequila on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Kris, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. For those who haven't sampled one of your delicious bottles of tequila, tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date.
So thank you, Kenneth.
Of course.
Hiatus Tequila, a brand I launched just over 15 months ago, but started the process back in 2015. The whole idea was I lived in Mexico for a very long time, and after being away for 11 years from the U.S., I moved back. And in the meantime, tequila and mezcal had really started to boom, and everybody was talking about these newer brands that were hitting the market. And I tried several of them, and they were less than interesting. I knew that there's a lot of great tequilas in Mexico, and unfortunately, not as many of them as should make it onto this side of the border. So the whole thing was, I'm going to make something much more authentic to what Mexican tequila is supposed to taste like, and introduce that to the market, which sounded like a novel idea at the time.
No kidding. What got you down to Mexico for 11 years?
I wasn't in Mexico 11 years at that time. I was 5 years at that time. I left the U.S. in 2002, and I moved to Europe, and then I moved to Australia, and then I moved to Mexico. The reason I moved to Mexico, my mom had retired back in 2001 time frame to Mexico, and quickly got all involved in real estate development, because at the time the whole world was on fire with real estate development, as you may recall. And I was living in Australia working for a company called Honeywell, and which is global conglomerate here out of New Jersey. And my mom kept saying, "You have to get over here. There's so much happening." And my ex-wife and I were looking for a new adventure, so we relocated to Mexico back in 2006 and got into the real estate game just in time for it to all implode at the end of 2008.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, as just out of interest and passion for the spirit, I started visiting a lot of the distilleries in the region, not just the tequila making region, but even outside of that, where they can make something called an agave distillate. And then, of course, in the mezcal making region as well. I've traveled extensively through Mexico since I was a kid. Really, my family did business in Mexico when I was very young, and then as an adult. For a while, I was selling helicopters in Latin America for Bell Helicopters, so I was in and out of Mexico for about 3 years during that period as well. So I've traveled extensively through Mexico in my life.
Yeah, it's a great place to adventure to, and spend time in. This was a really easy show for me to prepare for, I'll be honest. Years of Mexican food and way too many bottles of tequila later, I was able to draw back on decades of experience, as opposed to what happens so often in what I hear from people. I just published a new book and would love to promote it. So in full disclosure of preparing for this interview, I will admit that I drank an entire bottle of tequila and then started posting stupid stuff on social media and making weird phone calls in Spanish. Just kidding. But, where does the name Hiatus come from for your spirits?
Oh, that's a great question. So the thing about tequilas that drove me nuts on this side of the border was so many of them are going after the old school cues of Mexico.
Sure.
Mariachi bands, donkeys, sombreros, cactus. And I know a very different Mexico. I lived down there a total of almost 8 years at different times and in different places. And I just know a much more modern, contemporary side of Mexico. And I wanted to reflect that. And I wanted to be more about the people that are actually involved in the business. So if you look at our bottle, the people that are reflected in the imagery, they're the workers that actually are part of our distillery family down in Mexico. So the name was the tough one, because almost every word that North Americans would understand or have some reference to in Spanish was already taken by some other brand, whether it be tequila or corn chips or something.
Right.
So I spent a long time trying to figure that out, and I was about to hire an agency to help me with the name because I wanted something. So North America is the largest market for tequila in the world, more so than Mexico even. I wanted something that most North Americans could relate to, so that they could remember it. If you think about some of these big brands on the market, and I won't mention names, they have very difficult names to even say for a North American that doesn't speak any Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And, and if you can't even say it, you don't even know what the word means. You have no relationship with it. So then you walk into a bar and there's all these products there. You have to try to remember the one that you can't even pronounce, and you have no reference of what it even means.
Sure.
So I wanted something that you would relate to, and I just wasn't finding it. I wasn't having that aha moment until that aha moment happened when I had a friend call that I hadn't spoken with in nearly probably about 10, 11 months at that point. I had left the helicopter industry to do this project, and they called and said, "What have you been doing? What have you been up to?" And I said, "Oh, I've been on a hiatus working on this tequila project." And as soon as I said it, I thought, "Holy cow, what does a hiatus mean?" I mean, it's all about taking a break, doing something that you're passionate about, relaxing, whatever your hiatus it is.
Mm-hmm.
But why do we drink at all? We're trying to relax. We're trying to change our state of mind, and that's to me what a hiatus is all about. So I thought that's a brilliant name. Surely someone's used it for a spirit. So I immediately got on the trademark website, and it wasn't nobody had ever used it for a spirit. So I was like, holy cow, I'm going to go with this and see. We did focus groups. We tested it out. Some people were like, oh, but it's not a Spanish word. And I was like, yeah, but it's a concept that we all really believe in. And generally speaking, the people liked the word during the focus groups. But it was more about, what's the idea behind it? What does a hiatus stand for you, for me, for anybody? I mean, that's what I want people to think about. You know, Otherwise, you just come up with another name and then you try to build a story around it, and you hope that it resonates with people.
I
Right?
understand that you harvest from is it blue Weber agave? It looks like a pineapple and a cactus had a baby. And I read that it takes something like 8 years to harvest. That's a long time. What about droughts and bug infestations or anything else, disaster-ish that could break that supply chain with harvesting, a seasonal type product? How do you plan out for that?
Yeah, it's amazing. Most people don't realize that about the spirit, and agave spirits are probably the longest product to produce to actually get to the production. Not meaning the aging part, because sure you have scotches and whiskeys that are
Right,
aged
right.
decades, but getting the plant out of the ground takes anywhere from 6 to 10 years. And you're correct; it's the blue Weber. That's the scientific name. The agave azul, as it's known in Mexico. It has to be grown in a very specific region. So tequila not only has to be made in Mexico, but it has to be made in a very specific region. Think Champagne, region of France, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these farmers, there's about 13,000 farmers that supply all the agave to about 160 distilleries that are authorized to make what we call tequila. That region is beyond just one state of Jalisco, which is where the town of Tequila actually is. There's 4 other bordering states, or one in the middle of Mexico as well, that in certain regions of those states can make it. Not the entire state, but only the complete state of Jalisco can make it. Plus, there's 4 other partial states. So the agave has to be grown there. The distilleries have to be located in those areas. But yeah, it's a long time. So to answer your question about supply and demand issues due to whatever, lots can happen in that time frame. Whether it be drought or it be rainy seasons, or so many things can impact it. Thank goodness the region's quite vast, so
Right.
one area might get something. But luckily, knock on wood, there hasn't been any kind of outbreak of any kind of pest or anything in recent time that would cause any kind of disruption. If you listen to the media, you would think right now there's this huge undersupply of agave. That's not necessarily the case. The Tequila Regulatory Council are the ones that all these farmers have to be registered with, and they track their production. They track the number of agave that they're farming, as well as tracking the distilleries and all that. They know how much product's out there. What happens every 6 to 8 years, you'll see this shift in pricing, because these agave farmers are saying, wait a minute, tequila is booming. All these new brands are entering the market. George Clooney sold his company for $1 billion. Like, we want more of this. We're the ones taking all the risk here. We put something in the ground
Right.
that's not going to be harvestable for 6 to 8 years. So they start demanding higher prices. and rightfully so. I mean, they're doing a lot of hard manual labor and they're taking a ton of risks. So they start demanding more prices. The price of agave starts to go up. The distilleries start to scream that, oh, there's a shortage because the prices are going up. That means there's a shortage. Well, that's not necessarily the case. They're asking for more money. So then what happens? All these other farmers say, oh, price of agave is going up. Let's go plant some agave. So they go and plant agave, which aren't going to be ready for 6 to 8 years. So, you know,
Sure.
so then there's a cycle of, oh, now there's truly an oversupply where there wasn't necessarily an undersupply, but now there's an oversupply of agave. So then the price drops way back down again. And then you see this cycle every 6 to 8, 6 to 10 years. The sad thing is most of it is all to do with the fact that in Mexico, it's very difficult for a small farmer or small business in general to get, access to capital. So people take massive risks, and then at some point they want bigger rewards, and that's what you see. So in some cases, like with our distillery, they have, first of all, they control about 50% of their own agave, so they have total control over, how it's being farmed and harvested. But then they have long-term contracts in place with 3 other farming families. So that's a win-win situation because those farmers can better, forecast what is going to happen when there's spikes in pricing, as well as spikes in costs. And maybe it's even comes down to peso versus U.S. dollar fluctuation. So there's a better relationship there. Both parties win in the end, and that's the better way to do it. Unfortunately, a lot of distilleries don't have that option. They're buying agave on the open market. They have to eat those price swings, and they're usually the ones that cry foul and say, "Oh, there's a shortage." No, you weren't in a position, or you didn't choose to be in a position to actually work better with the farming community to stabilize pricing and make sure everybody's winning. That's really what it comes down to.
Well, I'm not going to call myself an expert. I just read a few, different articles about agave, and I can't remember what's the agave that's for mezcal.
Oh, there's several different
Yeah,
types. So that's one of the big differences. Tequila has to be made from the Blue Weber, the scientific name,
yeah.
the Blue Weber.
So what makes that Blue Weber distinctive? What makes it produce the better tequila,
Well, better's a
or a
tricky
better
word. So,
spirit rather? Yeah.
so, so tequila technically is a mezcal by definition, because if you go
Oh,
back
okay.
into mezcal, what it meant really is an agave-based spirit. So what we drink today in the U.S. mezcal is similar to tequila in that it has its own region now, and that's been around for quite some time. But technically, like historically, mezcal just meant agave-based spirit. So tequila was a mezcal. So mezcal was not a tequila because tequila is a part of
Gotcha.
mezcal. Mezcal can be made from various types of agave. The other big differentiator with mezcal, so first of all, it's agave has to come from a region as well, and it can be different types of agave. But it comes down to what gives it that distinct smoky flavor is the way in which it must be cooked. So the agave
Okay.
it's literally smoked, which there's very few tequilas that do that anymore. But historically, that's how they also cooked the agave in the tequila production, is they would also dig a big pit, create a fire, put the agave in there, and that's where the smokiness comes from. There's a couple
Interesting.
of brands of tequila that still do that, and actually, I think maybe it was Patron. Somebody recently came back, and they're doing a small batch of that as a big brand.
Hmm.
But that's where mezcal gets its smokiness. So two different distinct regions. Tequila can only use the Blue Weber agave in its production and has to come from that region. Mezcal can use multiple types of agave, but they have to cook it in that particular way that makes it very smoky.
So during the pandemic, obviously the coronavirus pandemic, that caused some issues with distribution and payments and everything else. We all think about the volume of people that buy at a liquor store, but obviously restaurants and bars consume a huge amount of alcohol as well for distributors. How has that affected business with those kind of establishments, closing down both temporarily and even some for good?
Yeah, it's a sad, sad story on all fronts. I mean, our business. So we had only launched about 14 months before the pandemic hit, and all of our states that we were distributing in had been impacted one way or the other significantly. So New York, where I'm based, and the majority of our team is. I mean, overnight we lost 80% of our customer base
Exactly.
when they turn, flip the switch on schools, bars, and restaurants.
Well, most bars and restaurants, today, if they're not chains, they're mom and pops. In New York, it's different, but even in most cities, most of the bars are individually owned. Most of the Mexican restaurants, for example, not that tequila's sold everywhere, but tequila at Mexican restaurants, which are obviously big consumers, a great majority of those are mom and pops that came up from Mexico. You find a lot of immigrants there who are extremely hardworking folks, and it's hard just enough to keep the bills open when things are good, let alone shutting it down for months.
Exactly. And what we're seeing now, so we're distributed in Indiana, Missouri, Florida, and New York.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're seeing now is New York is still in complete lockdown as far as bars and restaurants being open to in restaurant dining. It's just takeaway still. Indiana, Missouri, and Florida are now at some seating capacity levels of open. So we're starting to see things change now in Missouri, Indiana, and Florida. Luckily, what we've seen is most of the restaurants are opening back up. So they were impacted for sure, but they're probably in a better position to be able to open back up. We haven't seen any of our accounts that have not been able to reopen their doors when they're able to. New York, it's probably not going to be that case. Our fear is that we're probably going to see a significant loss of businesses that just will not be able to reopen because
Mm-hmm.
New York is super expensive to operate and do business in. And now, we're going on almost 3 months of them being closed. They would have probably ran through most of their, reserved capital. They're probably, if they were even able to get the payroll protection, that's a short window that, that would cover as well. I mean, if you just think rents in New York for some of these places are ginormous. So we just honestly think, again, because most of our accounts were individually owned, as you mentioned, and usually it wasn't a restaurant group that had 3 or 4 concepts. It was literally, hey, let's open a restaurant or let's open a bar.
Mm-hmm.
This is our life passion. And I just am afraid, very much afraid for New York market, particularly, that a lot of those are just not going to come back. I'd say 50% of our accounts probably will not be able to reopen in New York. Whereas in the other states, they've fared much better. Now, I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but that's my fear.
Yeah. Well, the rent in New York, and everybody knows how expensive it is. But I mean, the closet you have in your Manhattan apartment is much more than I probably pay for my mortgage. It's insane, and it becomes such a challenge. That's why I don't live there anymore. So, how are you going to pivot or consider pivoting then to a longer term strategy that maybe goes towards consumers away from B2B per se? Or are you starting to look at the consumer market more so than you did restaurants and bars?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our industry is so heavily regulated that
Exactly.
technically, as a supplier slash brand owner, especially for an imported product, it's almost impossible to ever legally sell to an end consumer. I mean, for us, it is. If we were a small distillery here in town in New York, there might be, you could sell to the public in certain circumstances. But for us as an imported product from Mexico, there's literally no way we can sell ever directly to a consumer. However, that being said, in this period, and this was already in our plans to do, but this certainly accelerated it, we opened our own online e-commerce part of our website where through a third party who is doing all the legislative, um, following all the legislative rules, we are able to sell direct. Now, it's not technically direct because it's not like I'm fulfilling it, but you can now go to shophiatustequila.com and buy a product, and it will get fulfilled through a third party who's following all, obeying all the legislative rules and get that product to the consumer. So at least now I can spend money on direct to consumer type marketing and actually see what happens. Whereas before, the best we could do is send somebody to Drizzly or to Minibar or one of these other, third parties, or to one of our own liquor store customers that had a good e-commerce platform. But we could never see if it actually resulted in a sale unless we literally called them and said, "Hey, did anything sell this week?"
Yeah, which is just
But
crazy when you think about companies like wines.com, which have had that market open for years.
right, yeah. So there are a lot of third party platforms you can get on, and you can spend a lot of money to see data. But we're just scrappy little startups. So for
Yeah.
me to be able to, one of these third parties, tons of money just to see a report, and yet still at that point, you're not necessarily going to see, did it come from an ad I did and it drove them to Drizzly and that converted to a sell. Like there's tools out there, but for a startup, it's not affordable.
Exactly. Obviously, like you said, this is a highly regulated industry. What are the regulations and challenges that you go through in marketing this brand if you are wanting to expand to other states? This is not, you mentioned Indiana and Florida and some of those other states where you're licensed to sell this, but it's not like you can just go pick up and start selling tomorrow in Pennsylvania, even though you're right down the street from a New York or New Jersey perspective.
Oh, that's a great example too, because that's the state runs all those
Exactly.
liquor stores, so that's a whole nother monster of
Yeah, you've got
navigating.
50 regulatory commissions before you even
Exactly,
get to selling it to the bars, restaurants, and other liquor stores.
exactly, and in those liquor control states, which is what they're called when the
Sure.
state actually controls it, the challenge is if they bring you in under strict, let's say, performance guidelines that over a 3 month period they want to see you hit certain goals. Well, so you're supposed to go from a brand that doesn't even exist in a market to selling X amount of cases a month to stay on their good list. So it's pretty much if you get in with one of those, you have to have significant capital now to get out there and really push that brand, which you should be doing anyway. But it's not it's not as easy as saying, hey, let's go test the market and see if our product resonates. It's like we better have a plan around this, because if you get kicked out of that store because you didn't hit those quotas, you'll pretty much be blacklisted forever. They'll never let you come
Absolutely.
back in. So it's a tricky one for a small brand to navigate. And again, we were an emerging brand, just a baby, really. So the part of the reason we got hurt more than others is we just weren't in enough liquor stores. So even though, yes, people are still consuming and they're still buying, and liquor store sales are through the ceiling because they're not being able to buy their products in bars and restaurants, so they're still buying. But we weren't in enough. We didn't. Our footprint wasn't big enough to cover the fact that we lost 80% of our consumer-based accounts, meaning bars and restaurants. We just weren't in enough liquor stores, and then on top of that, a lot of the liquor stores we were in, particularly in the New York area, are the small, family-owned ones that aren't, they're not significant e-commerce type businesses. They really service the community that they're in Manhattan, the blocks that they're surrounded by, and they didn't have a need to have this strong e-commerce platform or even be aligned with these Drizzly or these other apps, because literally their consumers walked in every day and bought
Mm-hmm.
something. They ran downstairs from the apartment that was above the liquor store and they bought something. So they were all like scrambling because a lot of them are so small they didn't want people in them physically during this time, even though they remained open. They wanted to do curbside pickup or delivery. So a lot of them struggle too to say, well, how do we, yes, people are buying like crazy. How do we get more of that if we don't even have an e-commerce platform? So there's going to be a huge shift, and even these small mom and pops being better positioned to continue to operate as is, and to weather future storms that will certainly come.
Agreed. So, what are you doing then from a marketing stance as a startup? I know one of the things that's helped, obviously, is getting the earned media recognition through places like, I think, Esquire and Maxim Magazine and some of these others where you were a top 100 recognized tequila or top 100 spirit. Talk about what that has done to help your brand get recognized in really an incredibly crowded field.
Yes, it's very much a crowded field for sure, and new brands are popping up by the day. Things have slowed down a little bit, but even The Rock recently announced his new tequila. So the recognition that we received early on, again, we're a small startup. We didn't have big budgets to go out there and spend lots of money on advertising so that we could get some recognition. So everything that we did in 2019, which was our first full year in operation, it was organic. Other than we did submit products to the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, which is open to any brand to be able to do, but it's a complete blind taste test. So they're just tasting juice against juice and making their decisions. And we did very well on that. We got a gold on Reposado and a silver on both our Añejo and our Blanco. So those things help because particularly there's a few that are very much recognized as the top um, kind of awards because they're not influenced by money. They're not influenced by how much did you spend last year. So we did very well. San Francisco World Spirits Competition. The other one that happened only 5 weeks after we launched, we get a 95 rating from wine enthusiasts for our añejo. They only did añejo in 2019. They tasted it. They gave it a 95 rating. That's huge. That's one of the highest ratings that they've given in añejo in recent times. So those things help significantly because the industry sees those as, the trade particularly sees those as, oh, those are legitimate, ratings and rankings and awards. And then these other things that followed, like the Esquire naming us one of the top 29 bottles of booze in 2019, and then later in the year, again, Wine Enthusiasts gave us the top 100 spirits of 2019. Those are all legitimate because they really found our product to be outstanding for its class and against other spirits as well. So that helps us get into new accounts. That helps us get a product into a liquor store, and then it helps that liquor store be able to sell it when they do talk about those ratings and awards. You know, there's not many other competitions that we feel like are worth participating in because, again, if the trade doesn't respect those, then it's, to us, it's not as important. The consumers, on the other hand, aren't as knowledgeable of what's legitimate, what's not legitimate.
Great point.
So, yeah, we could go out and buy a bunch of ratings. We could pay for a bunch of advertising placements. But for us, we won in the sense that what we did, the recognition we did get was something that the trade actually respects. They see that and they're like, oh, okay, that's pretty good. And then, of course, there'll be consumers that understand the significance of some of those things as well.
When you look at marketing these brands, I mean, obviously, when as a startup, you've got a new product, the different brands and flavors. As you start looking at the brand down the road, is it by introducing a new bottle of tequila that you go out and market? How do you look at marketing this going forward with either new flavors of your holistic brand or years of different bottles? And I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yep, no, I hear you, no problem. So our ethos has always been about educating the consumer, educating the trade and the consumer. Let me rephrase. Tequila and agave spirits in general are one of the most misunderstood products out there. You have a big portion of society that when you say tequila, they immediately get that tequila face and they don't want to try it at all. And that's why, because they, at some point in their life, they tried something that was probably like gasoline in a bottle.
Exactly, with a worm in it that they added for marketing effect.
Exactly. So part of our challenge is to open people's eyes to the fact that, hey, tequila, if done well, is a phenomenal drink. It's better for your body, and I'm no doctor, but it's better for your body than most spirits. And why is that? Well, it's gluten free. There's no grains, etc., in the production process, unless people add certain things back in. So ours is certified gluten free. You're using a plant, and everybody says, well, but all spirits are made from plants. Well, no, all spirits are not made from the plant itself. They're made from a seed, typically, of a plant. But we actually use the heart and soul of the plant. The sugars in our plant, which is called the agave, obviously, our body doesn't process them as sugars like other alcohols. So technically, our spirit is it's very low caloric because the sugars in it, the agavins, pass right through our body. If you're drinking 100% agave tequila, and that's another confusing part of our business, is there's tequila and then there's 100% agave tequila. What's the difference? Well, if it says just tequila on the bottle, it doesn't say 100% anywhere. It can be as little as 51% agave, and its other 49% is typically just sugar made from sugar cane, alcohol made from sugar cane, or other, it could be corn. They can use anything, but a minimum has to be 51% agave. So that's what a lot of people had really bad tequila nights with, is just drinking something that was just called tequila, probably doing shots after having 17 other types of drinks.
Exactly.
Right? And then tequila gets blamed for it all.
It does, of course.
But like anything, if you the cleaner you eat or drink, the better your body can process and the better it feels because it's trying to do less. You have a mix. Sometimes those tequilas that aren't 100% are called mixtos. That's basically two different types of sugars now that your body is having to try to digest, and then oftentimes they put coloring and flavors and other stuff in there. So now there's all these other things your body's trying to digest and create enzymes for, and that's when you wake up with that horrible hangover. And you probably had in a really sugary margarita to begin with. So
exactly.
Now your body's like an overload of different things it's trying to deal with. Whereas if you drink a very clean spirit, which is what we pride ourselves on, no additives, nothing that even is allowed by the by the rules that legislate tequila, um, your body will feel much better the next day. I mean, sure, we can always get drunk and drink too much of anything, but the cleaner the spirit is, the better. So back to your question, we've been trying to be the ones educating people to even ask the question of, wait, what is in my tequila? Because unfortunately, not like on the side of your box of cereal, what it says everything has to be in there. There's no such rule in particularly, agave spirits. So people just assume it's natural, and it's not. A lot of the times, people are putting caramel, they're putting sweeteners in there, they're putting oak extract is another one, and glycerin to make it have a particular texture that somebody thinks is important. Those are all different things that don't belong in there, and we
Exactly.
pride ourselves that we just make a better product from the start, starting from the agave being ripe, which sounds crazy, but that's that's the right place to start. A lot of some of the big brands, they don't care. They're just pushing stuff through their factories as quick as they can. They know that most people are going to dump it in a sugary margarita and hardly even taste the juice to begin with, so they don't care. We care. We care. It takes us much longer. It's a lot more money invested to make a better product. And so the education is important, getting people to ask, wait, what am I putting in my body? Now, is that important at the end of the day? To us, it's important. Maybe it's important to a small percentage of society, but that's where we started. So year one was all about educating the trade about tequila and about the category and about other agave spirits and how they relate to each other. Year two, which is where we're in now, was meant to be much more consumer oriented education. Obviously, got a wrench thrown in the works. We're not even allowed to literally stand in front of a consumer anymore because a lot of
Yeah.
what we used to do was,
Right.
in-store tastings or in restaurant and bar tastings where you have a representative from the company, oftentimes myself, um, talking about tequila and educating about tequila because people love knowledge, and just giving them a little bit, they sink their teeth into it and then go forth, and now they're a better consumer. So year one, again, we were really focused on the trade because we wanted the gatekeepers, the mixologists, the bartenders, the guys working on the shop floors. We wanted them to have that knowledge to help educate the consumer. And this year it was meant to all be about consumer education. Now, of course, we're having to adapt. How do we actually do that when we can't physically sit in front of one? so we're doing some things on YouTube where we're doing like a master class, more consumer oriented, a little bit of out of the box thinking on how to do those kind of things. But it's still an unknown. Most of the markets we're in again are opened up to some level, but we still can't do our job normally. There's still no in-store tastings. There's still no bars and restaurants that are allowing any kind of samples, and rightfully so. Like, I'd be nervous to take a shot that was prepared by somebody that's not wearing gloves or something,
Yeah. No. Yeah.
and be like, oh, let me sample that. So we're trying to adapt, and we'll see, where it goes
Well, I
the
think it's
rest of the year.
really interesting as well on your website. I think it's great because you start off with really being transparent on the process of how it's created with that education right on the front page. So I think that every bit of that helps. I wish more brands would do that and similar. So you're an entrepreneur. You've started this tequila brand. Obviously, that journey is tough during any time of any year, and it's more than it should be enough to drink to, in a good and bad way with what you can go through. What's the journey for you building this brand during a pandemic? I mean, you're a startup, but this is not like a digital marketing startup. This is something that people are having a hard time getting their hands on today, just not being able to get out and go grab a bottle even.
Yeah, no, the fear of even walking into a store or anything, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Things we just weren't
Well, the
forward
idea
thinking
that take
enough.
that you take a bottle of tequila and then need to wipe it down with a Clorox wipe before you feel okay with it is ridiculous.
Right,
At the same time, it's still true.
100%. No, it's this this has obviously been another hurdle to deal with, but as I guess part of the benefit of where we were in our life cycle is that we didn't have this huge team across the country and massive overhead that all came to a halt. So luckily, our small team, we didn't have to let anybody off or change anybody's work times or anything like that. We just kind of everybody kind of pivot slightly in what they were on their day to day to say, okay, look, let's take this time to reassess a few things. Let's take this time to retool. So we've been working on certain things like our CRM system, and making sure when we come out of this, a lot of those things that in the first year we saw, some cracks here and there, that we were trying to work on those. We were doing some of those educational videos, like I mentioned. Our primary brand ambassador has been busy doing that, whereas normal he's the one out there every day and at night in bars and restaurants doing education and talking to staff and all that. He's been trying to do a lot of that educational type stuff for our YouTube accounts and Instagram. So it's been a lot of everybody kind of had to wear multiple hats through this. We had an order place for product, a new container to come up, and of course that got delayed by about 6 weeks, for various reasons. They shut down the distilleries for a minute. The government quickly reversed that down in Mexico because they realized it impacted the agave farmers, because agave has to be harvested when it's ready. It's not seasonal. When it's ready, it needs to come out of the ground, and you can't just refrigerate it. So they realized, wait a minute, if we shut down the distilleries, we're shutting down 13,000 families that support, the industry. So there's been so many twists and turns. We finally got that truck. Finding a company to do transportation was really difficult, because so much is happening in that area. So we finally got it across the border and everything, but it took a good 6 weeks longer than we had anticipated. But yeah, it's just a matter of being flexible and adapting. Right now we're trying to figure out how we're going to continue to talk to consumers. On the digital marketing side, what we need to advance upon, since we're really not going to be able to do liquid to lips, tastings this summer as we would normally have done. So we're trying to figure out, well, how do we be relevant and break through the noise. It's one thing when we were standing in front of a consumer and they can try the product.
100%.
It was a slam dunk. I mean, we would do these in-store tastings, and we would sell cases, and people would have, like, one of our competitors' bottles in their hand. We're like, wait, before you buy that, please try this. And like 9 times out of 10 they would buy. How do we still get that to happen when they can't? I mean, they have to take the risk and buy the whole bottle and have it shipped to their house or something to try it now. And it's like,
Such a
how do
great
we
point.
overcome that? Yeah, that's our biggest challenge, because when we were doing face to face, even blind taste against some of their favorite brands, we were killing it, because we're very much a superior product. But now it's like, oh, how do you win that war when they're so used to buying brand X, and normally you can convert them by having them taste your product. How do you convert them now without that ability? So we're trying to figure out creative ways to, is it little sample bottles that we can mail out, which technically we'd be breaking all kinds of laws if we do. Again, very regulated industry. There's a lot that we're still trying to figure out, and it's going to continue to evolve and change as we go too,
Sure.
as the states open up, and God forbid if things get bad again in the fall, as some people predict, we'll be all over again.
Yeah.
Now what?
Well, try before you buy was enough of a challenge during a normally good time, but I mean, it's going to be so interesting just to see, as you said, how to break people from those habits. We saw so many different distilleries of so many different flavors making hand sanitizer during the pandemic. Did you guys take part in that effort? Is that something that you can do with tequila in some way?
Yeah, it's very tricky. I won't say nobody was able to pull it off, but again, there's only 160 distilleries that are authorized to make tequila, and there's 1,600 brands. So almost every single distillery makes multiple brands. So you basically have to somehow get all the brands that come out of that particular distillery to say, let's all change and go to hand sanitizer.
Right.
And I just can't imagine that would work, because most of these distilleries are creating brands that are shipping all over the world. There's brand owners that sit all over the place that own some of these brands. So it would have been very difficult for the average distillery. Now, of course, a Patron that only makes Patron, or a Cuervo that only makes Cuervo products, or a Salsa that only makes Salsa, they could have made that decision. Or a small, teeny little distillery that only makes, whatever their one product might be. But for the majority of them, it would have been very challenging. I can't say that none of them did that, but ours certainly did not do that.
Sure.
They had, like, our product was I think we bottled the first week in March. No, it was, sorry, the first week in April. We were supposed to bottle mid-March, but that all got pushed around with all these closing. I mean, I was supposed to fly down there for it, which obviously didn't happen, but there was just too many things in the works, I think, for the majority of them, to be able to try to pivot and do that. There might be some that did it. I don't know. I haven't heard and I haven't been able to go down to beloved Mexico to see what's really going on down there either.
Well, you need to find a healthcare worker that you know and like, and donate a good bottle of this when things get better, or when things are better. I'd love to be able to ship them one just to say thank you, and here's some time, as you said, to take a hiatus and relax. So
Yeah,
I'll pay for it when that bill comes. So well,
all of the essential workers out there. I think of our guy delivering the mail every day, and I think the
exactly.
people working at the cash registers in the grocery store. I mean, they all need a hiatus after this.
Agreed.
We all needed a hiatus before this. This
Yeah,
wasn't
agree. Yeah,
exactly the
true.
hiatus that most of us wanted.
Well, Kris, there are no sharks in Jalisco, but the waters just north of there of Baja are fantastic breeding grounds for the larger great white population. I ask this of all my guests that have been on a shark's perspective. What is your favorite kind of shark and why?
My favorite kind of shark and why? Oh, that's a great question. Let me think about that. I mean, it's probably everybody or a lot of people's choice, but the great white to me is fascinating creature. So I lived in Australia for almost
Oh yeah.
4 years, 5 years almost. I can't remember now. And just the amount of miles the great whites cover through their lifetime
Unbelievable. Absolutely.
is unbelievable to me. And they get a bad rap,
I
maybe
know.
rightfully so in some cases, but we humans are way worse than the poor sharks. But I think, yeah, the fact that they can travel such vast distances and survive so many things, total respect. But, they're the badass of the ocean, I guess.
Agreed.
So,
Agreed. I'll drink to that. So, well, Kris, it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
okay, I'm ready.
All right. Number 1, if you were drinking a margarita, frozen or on the rocks, and salt on the rim or sugar?
Rocks and lightly salted.
Okay. All right. Number 2, tequila, Mexico or New York?
Ooh, to live in New York.
Depends on what day you say that anymore.
Yes.
With what's going on, it might be a nice retreat. All right, number 3. I don't know if you're a country music fan at all, but there's been a lot of tequila songs about tequila. Dan or Shay, the country music superstars who sang the 2018 top of the country Billboard song Tequila.
Oh, Shay, I guess.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't tell you which one's the other either. But I really do like that song Tequila. All right, number 4. 2 of the interesting flavors you have. I've got a bottle of Blanco with me, but añejo or reposado?
For me, reposado.
Okay. Why so?
Reposado is the one that's least known, and what I like about it. So I'm a purist. So Blanco is my favorite, and the more something ages, any alcohol, the more it starts taking the characteristics of the whatever it's aging in, normally of
Mm-hmm.
the oak barrel. And so our añejo is amazing, but the more it ages, the more mellow it becomes, the more it gets some sweeter notes that it pulls from the barrel. And when I think of drinking tequila, I want something a little bit rougher, and the reposado is a nice balance between the Blanco that has a little bit more of a bite to it, and añejo that's super mellow. So that reposado is a nice in between. If I'm choosing between añejo and reposado.
Perfect. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh man,
Which goes better with tequila? I would think I would think based on time of day it would be cornbread, but I don't know.
yeah, I guess I never thought about that, but I guess cornbread would probably make more sense with the tequila because I would think biscuits, but it'd have to have a lot of gravy on it. I mean, I
Yeah,
grew up in South, I grew up in
I've
Texas,
never
so
had biscuits and gravy and tequila. That would be a different.
yeah, that sounds a bit sloppy.
You might have a problem, something else in your life. But, well,
Right.
Kris, where can people find out more about you, the Hiatus brand, keep up with what you guys are doing and more?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. HiatusTequila.com, at Hiatus Tequila on Instagram, shop Hiatus Tequila if you're interested. That shop can deliver in the continuous 48 states, so anywhere there. And for your guests, if they put in the code on hiatus, we'll give free shipping
Awesome.
anywhere in those 48 states. So just on hiatus, one word, make it one word in the code. But yeah, we appreciate the opportunity to be here. We love talking geeky stuff about tequila. If anybody has any questions, I can go on and on and
Yeah.
on about that. Our YouTube channel, if you just Google YouTube Hiatus Tequila, our brand ambassador Garrett, he's done a great job of doing a deep dive on differences in regionality and production methodology, not just of our product, but it's a master class. So it talks about how other tequilas do it, and it even gets into agave and some of the other Mexican spirits are mentioned, and regulation, and all the good stuff that we've gone through in this journey in the last several years.
Agreed. Kris, thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
All right, Kenneth, I appreciate your time and appreciate your audience listening to our story.
So there was my conversation with Kris Desoto, the founder and CEO of Hiatus Tequila. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, I just love the conversation around where they've, and I'll use an overused word here, pivot, but they've pivoted to pushing more through an e-commerce channel to reach customers they didn't focus on a lot before. Again, this is a highly regulated industry that hasn't allowed a lot of additional distribution channels, so it's not like you can just set up that channel anywhere. However, there are a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, who have stayed on hiatus, if you will, during this pandemic. Start looking for additional channels, affiliates, etc. Influencers, where you can sell your products or services in a way that's non-traditional to you. They won't all make sense, but you may find one that opens an additional revenue stream and helps your customers get additional access to, in this case, tequila. Second, smart lesson on ratings and earned media. You see a lot of people going after and chasing any and all earned media and awards. So many want to say that they have an award winning this product or an award winning this agency. Think about whether those reviews or awards really support the quality of the brand to the buyers you want. Social proofing is not just for dummies who don't see through a lot of that. There's a lot of junk media out there, so don't chase after the junk that doesn't help you establish better trust and credibility. Third, love how they're selling through educating the customer. It's still a rarity today, but you can create a remarkable amount of interest just around education. As he said, people love knowledge, and you can especially look at that with influencers who love to drop that kind of knowledge to their flocks. Getting people to ask, be transparent, make them curious, and then produce a damn good tequila or whatever your product or service is. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Please, as always, drink responsibly and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.